Imagine a child digging in the ground in a garden. Without knowing it, she finds a shiny object, half buried in the damp earth. She looks at it, fascinated, but distracted by a distant call, she leaves it there. She grows up, forgets, and spends her life looking for what she had already found. That child is you. Curious, isn't it? We can spend years, sometimes our whole lives, looking for a treasure that is already inside us. Here's an intriguing question. What if everything you're looking for was already with you from the start? The answer is even more surprising. It is. But we've been taught to look in the wrong place. From an early age, we receive signals, subtle and constant, that we are not enough as we are. You need to be more beautiful, more productive, richer, more spiritual. And so, without realizing it, we stop looking inwards. We are distracted by promises of completeness in diplomas, achievements, followers, relationships, and goals. The self-image industry is worth trillions around the world. And no wonder. It feeds on the feeling that something is always missing in us. But what if that feeling is artificial? What if it's the side effect of a world that profits from our inner disconnection? Neuroscience research indicates that the human brain is biologically programmed to seek external validation, an evolutionary inheritance that has helped us survive in groups. But what protected us in the past now imprisons us. We live in pursuit of something. We don't really know what. And that's where the key point comes in. You don't need to become someone. You need to remember who you are. This lost treasure is not a metaphorical idea. It's about your awakened consciousness, your ability to perceive without filters, to be at peace without reason. A force that is alive within you, but has been buried under layers of beliefs, expectations, and unquestioned stories. Have you ever felt, even after achieving something important, that something was still missing? That strange feeling of emptiness, as if happiness had slipped through your fingers just after the moment of glory. It's more common than it seems. Maybe you've closed a big deal, passed a difficult exam, moved to another city, or received compliments on social media. And yet silently, that nagging question comes up. Why do I still feel incomplete? This is because we have been trained, yes, trained, to look for meaning in external achievements. From an early age, we learn that value lies in achieving, not in being. We are programmed to believe that the next victory will bring the feeling we so desperately want. But what nobody tells us is that this search is endless. Society has built a model where self-esteem is measured in productivity and identity is built on labels. Who are you has become synonymous with what do you do, how much do you earn, or how many followers do you have. According to a study by the American Psychological Association, around 68% of young adults report feeling that they are not good enough, regardless of their achievements. What does this tell us? That the whole is not in what we have, but in the way we see ourselves. The illusion of insufficiency is not born of failure, but of conditioning. It lies in the silent comparison we make when we open a social media feed. It's in the fear of not pleasing, in the guilt of resting, in the shame of being vulnerable. It convinces us that peace is always in the future and that now is not enough. But what if this is just noise created by the mind? Imagine a room full of mirrors, each one reflecting a distorted image of you. If you spend your life believing in these images, you'll forget what your real face looks like. That's how the mind is when influenced by external beliefs. It distances us from our original form. And the curious thing is that this disconnection drives us to consume. We seek relief in shopping, food, achievements, distractions. It's a desperate attempt to fill a space that deep down isn't empty. It's just forgotten. That's why it's essential to realize it's not about accumulating, but about recognizing the value that exists when we're not doing anything, when we're not trying to be better, just present. But beware, this doesn't mean settling down. It means changing direction. Stop chasing. and start turning inwards. The question changes from how can I improve to who am I without all these demands? This is where true freedom begins. When you give yourself permission not to match, not to compete, to simply exist without justifying yourself. So the next time that old thought comes up, I need to be more. Try taking a deep breath and asking, who told me that? And why did I believe it? The answer may not come right away, but the space that this question opens up is already the beginning of healing. Try to remember the last time you just stopped, without thinking about what comes next, without worrying about what has passed, just there, present, like a leaf floating in the air, without haste, without direction. It's hard, isn't it? We live in an age where stopping has become synonymous with failure, and where resting seems a luxury reserved for the few. Time, that invisible dimension, has become a silent tyrant that dictates our rhythms, our fears, and even our identity. But here's an uncomfortable question. Does time really exist in the way we believe it does? Research in cognitive neuroscience shows that the human brain can only process the present moment. The past and future in practice are mental reconstructions, interpretations. According to a study by University College London, our sense of time is a construct of consciousness based on memories and projections. In other words, all we really have is now. Even so, most of humanity lives in exile from the present. We are constantly reliving past mistakes or projecting future scenarios. This creates constant anxiety, as if the present moment were just a stepping stone and never the destination. Our conditioning has taught us that life is always ahead, the next job, the next relationship, the next trip, as if the present moment were just an uncomfortable interval between one achievement and another. The problem is that this logic turns existence into an eternal wait. And while we wait, life slips away. It's like being on a high-speed train without ever looking out of the window. You hear the sound, you feel the movement, but you can't see the landscape. And one day, when you try to remember the journey, everything seems like a blur. This imprisonment of time also manifests itself in the little things. The anxiety of looking at the clock, the annoyance of being without a cell phone, the rush to finish tasks without even knowing why. According to the Gallup Institute, around 60% of people report being constantly worried about the future, even when there is no concrete reason for it. It's an alarming figure, but it helps explain why depression and anxiety disorders are among the most common problems of our generation. But what happens when, even for a few seconds, we break this pattern? When you immerse yourself in the now, time loses its rigidity, the body relaxes, the mind slows down, and something deeper begins to emerge. A feeling of being connected to something that doesn't depend on the past or the future. This state cannot be bought, taught, or forced. It needs to be remembered, because you've already been there when you were a child and lost yourself in play. When you listened to a song and forgot your watch. When you looked at the sky without rushing. The present has this power. It doesn't demand anything, just your attention. So why do we shy away from it so much? Perhaps because the present strips us bare. There are no excuses, plans, or masks, just us and what is, and that can be uncomfortable until it becomes liberating. Today, perhaps you can practice a small act of rebellion. Sit still for 5 minutes, not to wait for something to happen, but to realize that everything is already happening. The present moment is the only place where life really happens. Everything else is just noise. Imagine that at birth you were given a mask. It would have your name, your gender, a culture, beliefs, preferences, and even an expected type of behavior. Over time, you get so used to wearing it that you forget there's a face underneath. That mask is the ego, and the game it plays is so subtle that we rarely notice it. But what exactly is the ego? It's not arrogance, as many people think. The ego is the me that we believe we are. It's the mental identity formed by thoughts, memories, traumas, expectations, and social labels. It acts as a filter between us and reality. And although it's useful for survival, when we assume it's who we really are, we start to suffer. Here's a provocative question. If you lost your memories, your career, your name, would you still be you? The answer is not simple, but it points to something profound. You are not your story. We cling to the idea of being someone because it gives us security, even if that someone is overwhelmed, exhausted, sad, or anxious. We still prefer them to the uncertainty of not knowing who we are without these narratives. The ego builds its value on control. It feeds on the past, projects the future, and fears the unknown. That's why it avoids the present, where it loses control. Research in behavioral psychology shows that resistance to change is strongly linked to the preservation of self-image. In other words, the ego would rather repeat destructive patterns than recognize that it is wrong. And there's a biological reason for this. The human brain associates familiarity with safety. Even if something causes us pain, if it's familiar, our nervous system accepts it as normal. This is why so many remain trapped in toxic relationships, energy-draining jobs, or self-destructive habits. But there is another way. It starts with a simple gesture, observing, watching your thoughts as if they were passing clouds, feeling emotions without sinking into them, recognizing reaction patterns without identifying with them. This is what we call the inner witness, the part of us that sees without judging. This observation is not passivity, it's active awareness, and this is where real transformation begins. The ego will resist. It will tell you that you're losing yourself, that it's dangerous to let go of old habits, that there's no time for that. But these are voices that echo the fear of the unknown, not the truth. Little by little, with practice and presence, you begin to realize there is a space between you and your thoughts, between you and your emotions. And in that space, there is freedom. It's like discovering that the mask can be taken off, that you can wear it when you need to, but you don't have to sleep in it anymore. When we stop fighting to maintain a fixed identity, we make room for something truer to emerge: authenticity. Truly being yourself isn't about adding more layers. It's about removing what isn't essential. And perhaps in the end, your greatest power is exactly this: not to be who you believed yourself to be, but something much greater, silent and vast. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable silence can be? In a conversation, when there's a long pause, someone immediately tries to fill it. At home, in the car, or even before bed, we look for music, noises, notifications, anything to escape the silence. But why are we so afraid of it? The answer may lie in the fact that silence reveals what noise hides. When everything is quiet outside, we start to hear what's going on in here, and that can be frightening. We live in a world that values movement, productivity, and constant performance. To be silent, to stop, to look inside, sounds almost like a modern sin. However, it is precisely in this place of pause that true intelligence manifests itself. According to research published in the Journal of Brain Structure and Function, just 2 minutes of absolute silence activates areas of the brain associated with memory, creativity, and emotional control. This is because, by reducing stimuli, the brain enters a state of integration and reorganization. In other words, when you are silent, your internal system aligns itself. But the silence we're talking about here isn't just the absence of sound. It's a kind of active listening, an openness, a space of presence where the mind stops dictating and starts observing. It's in this space that great answers usually emerge. Have you ever noticed that many brilliant ideas appear in the shower, during a walk, or in those moments when you are completely disconnected from distractions? That's no coincidence. It's silence at work. There is a natural wisdom in you that only expresses itself when there is space. But as long as we are immersed in the noise of external demands and mental chatter, it remains muffled. This deep silence also connects us with something more essential: peace. Not that fragile peace that depends on circumstances, but a solid peace that requires no reason to exist. A peace born of acceptance, surrender, and listening. And here's the most interesting point. You don't need a spiritual retreat to access it. You can find it now, right where you are. Just stop for a moment. Watch your breath, feel your body, and allow a tiny spark of stillness to emerge, even in the midst of chaos. At first, it comes timidly, almost imperceptible, but the more you invite it, the stronger it becomes. By cultivating this inner silence, we begin to distinguish between what is essential and what is noise. We realize how many decisions we make out of fear, haste, or the need for approval. Silence doesn't erase problems, but it changes the way we see them. It's like a calm lake where, when we look at the surface, we can clearly see what's at the bottom. And with this clarity, we start to act with more wisdom, more compassion, and more presence. Perhaps the greatest gift you can give yourself today is not to respond immediately, not to react, not to fill the space, just breathe, to feel, to be. Because sometimes, in the midst of the noise of the world, all your soul needs is a moment of silence to remind itself that it's still alive. If this video has made sense to you so far, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll continue to receive content like this, which invites you to take a breath and reconnect with what really matters. Imagine you're carrying a backpack. At first, it's light, but over the course of your life, you fill it with memories, fears, expectations, beliefs, hurts, and demands. One day you forget you're carrying anything. You just feel the constant weight on your shoulders and wonder why everything seems so difficult. This invisible weight is what we call attachment. But what does attachment actually mean? Attachment is not love. It's not care, it's not involvement. Attachment is the unconscious belief that you need something or someone to be complete. It's when your peace becomes dependent on the behavior of others, your achievements, or external validation. And then a perplexing question arises. How many of the things you consider yours are actually part of who you are? If you lose a title, a position, a relationship, do you cease to exist? The answer is clear, no. But the ego thinks differently. It confuses form with essence. It identifies with the role, the status, the history. And when something threatens these elements, it reacts with fear, resistance, and pain. That's why detachment doesn't mean abandonment. It means liberation. It's not about living without anything, but about not being possessed by what you have. It's the ability to maintain bonds without imprisonment. It's about being fully present without losing yourself. Studies at Yale University have shown that people with greater emotional flexibility, those able to let go of outdated ideas and beliefs, have higher levels of well-being and adaptability. This suggests that mental attachment is one of the roots of modern suffering. And there's something even deeper. Many of our attachments are not material, but identity-based. We cling to the image of who we think we are. I'm anxious. I'm insecure. I'm someone who needs to prove their worth. And we repeat this like a mantra, without realizing that each repetition reinforces the prison. To disidentify is to look at these labels and realize that's in me, but I'm not that. It's like watching a movie without forgetting that you're there. You feel, you vibrate, you cry, but you know that it's not you. Consciousness remains intact, and that consciousness is the space where transformation takes place. The process of letting go can be uncomfortable. It goes against everything we've been taught. The ego shouts, tries to negotiate, makes excuses, but with kindness and presence, we begin to let go. Not out of obligation, but out of clarity. Letting go of anger that no longer serves. Letting go of the demand for perfection. Letting go of the need to control everything. And little by little, the backpack becomes lighter. You start to walk more lightly, breathe more deeply, look at the world more truthfully, because deep down, freedom doesn't lie in achieving more, but in needing less. You didn't come into this world to be an accumulation of stories, titles, and obligations. You came to experience being in its purest form, light, conscious, present. And this only happens when you have the courage to let go. Close your eyes for a moment and try to answer in silence. Who are you, without your name, without your profession, without your history? This question, simple in appearance, is capable of dismantling the most rigid structures of the mind. We are so used to defining ourselves by our forms, our body, our personality, our thoughts, that we forget something fundamental. We are not what we can describe. We are what is conscious of the description. Imagine the sky on a cloudy day. The clouds move, change shape, cover the light, but the sky remains there, untouched, even when we can't see it. That's what consciousness is like, silent, immense, constant, even when it's hidden by the passing forms of life. But how do we find that space again? It all starts with the realization that there is an observer inside you, the one who notices what you feel, who perceives what you think, who recognizes when you are reacting. This observer has no name, no gender, no nationality. It simply is. And curiously, it has always been with you. Since childhood, in moments of silence, enchantment and amazement, this silent presence has manifested itself. But as we grew up, the mind began to speak louder. We learned to identify with what we do, with what we have, with what others say we are, and the voice of being became muffled. According to a study published by the Harvard Gazette, the state of mindfulness, also known as mindfulness, activates regions of the brain linked to emotional self-regulation and expanded perception. This shows us that it is possible to access a consciousness beyond thought, a living intelligence that observes without judging. But beware, being doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't demand attention, it waits. It doesn't compete with the mind, it just observes its games calmly. Reconnecting with this essence requires no effort, it requires presence. When you are deeply present, even in simple tasks, like washing dishes, feeling the wind on your face, listening to the sound of the rain, something inside you relaxes. And this relaxation makes room for the truth that you don't need to be something specific to deserve to exist. You already are, complete, enough, whole. And the more you inhabit this space of consciousness, the more you realize that your identity is not a fixed someone. It is a fluid experience, a dance between what you feel, perceive, observe, and allow. You are not the wave. You are the ocean that contains all the waves. You are not the thought. You are the field where thoughts appear and disappear. You are not the body. It's the presence that animates that body. And the more you live from this perception, the lighter you become. Because you no longer carry the obligation to uphold an ideal self. You simply allow life to express itself through you, without masks, without effort, without control. It is in this place of non-form that true freedom begins. Not as a concept, but as an experience, a freedom that doesn't depend on circumstances or approval, a freedom that springs from the simple act of being. Have you ever noticed that life always happens now, never yesterday, never tomorrow? Even when you remember something or plan for the future, everything is still unfolding right now. And yet, we spend most of our days living anywhere but in the present. Our mind is a compulsive traveler. It wanders through what could have been, what could go wrong, what needs to be done later. And with that, the only thing we really have, this moment, gets lost like sand between our fingers. But here's a provocation. What if the now were more than a passing instant? What if it were, in fact, a portal? This idea may sound poetic, but science is already beginning to confirm it. A Harvard University study revealed that on average, people spend 47% of their mental time distracted, thinking about something other than what they're doing. And this state of wandering mind is directly associated with lower levels of happiness. In other words, the less we are present, the more we suffer. Presence is not just a spiritual practice, it's a remedy for inner chaos. It's in the now that we feel our bodies, we listen to our breath, that we perceive our surroundings without filters, that we see people without projecting, that we listen truly to what is being said. To be present is to get in touch with life in its purest form. And surprisingly, this doesn't require any monumental effort. You don't need hours of meditation or a retreat in an exotic location. Often, all it takes is a moment of sincere attention. For example, right now, pause for 3 seconds. Take a deep breath. Notice the air coming in and going out. Feel the weight of your body where you are sitting or standing. Listen to the sounds around you. Notice that for a few moments. Nothing is missing. That's presence, and it has a transformative effect. When you enter this state, worries seem to dissolve. Not because they have disappeared, but because they are no longer the focus of your attention. You stop reacting automatically and start responding more clearly, more calmly, more truthfully. And the most beautiful thing, presence reveals small miracles hidden in simplicity. The touch of the wind on your skin, the smell of fresh coffee, the spontaneous smile of someone in the street. Things that have always been there, but only show themselves when you're available. There is no ideal moment to be present. Now is always the invitation, and the more you accept this invitation, the more life stops being a sequence of tasks and becomes a vivid experience. Presence is the antidote to anxiety, tiredness, and haste, because it returns us home to the only place where life really happens. So the next time your mind wants to race into the future or get lost in the past, breathe, go back, feel it. This is the portal, and it's always open, waiting for you.
Sometimes it looks so young.
These little things, often called ordinary, contain a depth that can only be accessed when we are whole in the present. But then why don't we see them? Because we've been taught to look for the extraordinary. We believe that the answers will come through great events, epic achievements, or unusual experiences. We wait for spectacular signs, for cinematic moments. And while we wait, real life happens. The deepest spirituality doesn't lie in heavenly voices or mystical visions. It lies in intimacy with what is simple. And the most curious thing is that when we are really present, these little things reveal something immense. It's as if the entire universe were condensed into a single instant. And there, in that apparently banal scene, something inexplicable happens. A feeling of connection, of completeness, of the sacred. According to philosopher Alan Watts, the meaning of life is not hidden somewhere in the future. It is here, now, in the act of consciously perceiving what is happening. This perception doesn't require more effort. It requires less filtering. You don't need to understand life to feel its depth. You don't need to name the miracle to experience it. You simply allow things to be what they are without trying to label, control, or interpret. This surrender to simplicity is an act of profound intelligence, because in it we recognize that we don't know everything, and we don't need to. Life doesn't demand that you have all the answers. It just asks you to be. Be there for yourself, for each other, for the moment. Be aware of what reveals itself when you let go of the need to understand and start simply observing. This simplicity is like a soft flame. It doesn't burn, but it warms. It doesn't shine brightly, but it illuminates enough to show the way. And little by little you realize it's not complexity that brings meaning. it's the way you look at things. A flower doesn't open faster because you understand its biology. It reveals itself in its own time, and that's enough. The same goes for you, for the other, for the mystery of existence. So the next time you feel something is missing, look around. Really look. Perhaps life is whispering something in its simplicity that you've been ignoring. And in that whisper lies everything you've been trying to hear. Every journey, however long it may seem, is ultimately an attempt to return home. But what if that home isn't a physical place? What if it's a state of being? From the beginning of life, we are thrown out of ourselves. We are shaped by ideas, standards, expectations. We learn who we should be, how we should act, what we should want. Little by little, we move away from our essence, not out of malice, but out of conditioning. And so the journey begins, a long walk full of curves, falls, searches, idealizations, all in the hope of finding something that will restore meaning. But little by little, something begins to change. We realize that what we were looking for outside was always inside, and that's when the real return happens. The return is not a return to the past. It's a dive into the present with new eyes. A reunion with simplicity, with breathing, with silence, a recognition, I am. No adjectives, no effort, no need to prove anything. This return to the essence is also an unlearning. Unlearning to run all the time, unlearning to resist what is, unlearning to identify with pain. As the spiritual master Ramana Maharshi said, you don't have to become anything. You just need to stop believing that you are not who you already are. This wisdom is simple but powerful, and science is starting to get closer to this insight. Research in the field of transpersonal psychology shows that practices of presence and deep self-reflection can lead to lasting states of peace, purpose, and integration. What many traditions call awakening. But this awakening is not magical, nor is it sudden. It happens in layers, each time you choose to observe rather than react, each time you accept rather than resist, each time you breathe instead of getting lost in the rush. It's an organic process, and silent, and perhaps that's why it's so precious, because it can't be bought or taught, only lived. The inner journey is, in fact, the real destination. The place we've always been looking for in people, places, experiences, but which deep down has never left us. It was just waiting for our attention. When you return to your essence, you realize something surprising. There is nothing left to achieve. There is no ideal version of yourself to build. There is no more need for approval, control, or escape. There is only now, and now is enough. From this space, you begin to live differently, with more lightness, with more truth, with more compassion. And not because you're trying too hard, but because you're at peace with who you are. So if you've made it this far, not just by listening, but by feeling, know that something inside you is already remembering what was never lost, remembering your own light. And perhaps now, the only question that remains is, are you ready to inhabit who you really are? Because the door is open, and the path begins exactly where you are. If you've come this far, it wasn't by chance. Perhaps something inside you, something silent but very much alive, has recognized this message, not as something new, but as an old memory, like an echo of your own essence calling you home. That's the invitation. Live from the inside out. Breathe with presence. Look at the world with clear eyes. Allow yourself to just be. The journey doesn't end here. In fact, it's just beginning. And it starts with small gestures, a pause before reacting, a more conscious breath, an instant of gratitude without reason. You don't have to change everything. You just need to be where you are with an open heart. If this content made sense, don't stop here. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the content. Now watch this next video, where I show you another essential step to change your reality.